Good morning, and thank you for joining us here for Live Impact News and 13 News Now Plus. We appreciate you whether you're watching us on our streaming app or if you are watching us live on a YouTube right now. My name is Eugene Daniel, and boy, do we have a packed show for you and a little bit of a packed house right now, too, in our streaming studio. You can see here that is our producer this morning, Olivia Benner. There you go. Give a wave to the people. And we have meteorologist Craig Muller. We also are going to have a special guest coming in a bit. And you can't see her on the screen right now, but producer Sarah Calloway is here as well for those who, yes, are used to seeing her in the mornings. And so the big thing that a lot of people want to know right now here in Hampton Roads, and really honestly other parts of the country, is it going to snow this weekend? We've been talking about it for the last few days. And Craig, the models you're saying have adjusted a little bit, but still saying there's going to be some snow coming.
Still a major winter storm. I mean, for the country, for the eastern half of the country, this is going to be a very, very big weather story. And we'll talk about this as we go along here. I want to start off by showing you kind of what's changed a little bit since yesterday. And remember, throughout the week, since we've talked about this developing system, we've always said how important it is to stay tuned for updates. That's not lip service. That's not just trying to get people, let's get more clicks and views. None of that. The bottom line is things can change, and they often do, especially when you're talking about something that's 4 or 5 days out. Now, let's take a look at what's gone on. Overnight, the model's still very consistent in developing this winter storm. It will be a big story across parts of the country. Where exactly we see the heaviest snow, that's what's still playing out. The models have shifted a little farther to the north, and there looks like now there's going to be some more warmer air, kind of what we call entraining into the system, getting wrapped or pulled into the system. And that is going to promote some different things. We're going to see some areas with mixed precipitation. We're talking about various forms of kind of rain-snow mix or some sleet, possibly some freezing rain, which I think folks can agree that is nothing fun to deal with there. Freezing rain is no bueno. As we look forward, we're also going to see areas of rain, and then some areas will see mostly snow. So the bottom line is the snow forecast is really tricky. So many times when it comes down to a winter storm, people get hung up. Well, you said it was going to be 3 inches or 5 inches or 20 inches or whatever. That's not the big deal here. The big deal is that there is a winter storm that's going to come in, and it's going to impact much of the eastern U.S., and we're going to see some impacts with wintry weather here. So again, this is going to be a long duration event. We've extended now our weather impact alert, really shifted it. I was saying yesterday it would start Saturday, most likely afternoon. Well, we're calling that weather impact alert really Saturday afternoon through Monday morning, because the tail end, it's now looking like there's a possibility some of this precip could hang around. Now, as far as the impacts go, I bumped up the impacts from rain, and not that it's going to be widespread flooding, rain, or anything catastrophic that way. No, I just want folks to know there's going to be more rain in the mix. In addition, there's still going to be that moderate to high impact from snow, and then ice. We bumped that up to really a moderate level now. It depends on exactly where the system tracks and where that mix of sleet and freezing rain sets up, but ice is a greater concern relative to yesterday. Right now, the winds don't look as bad. As far as our confidence meters go, precip type, I am very confident we're going to see an array. Snow, mix, rain, sleet, freezing rain, all possible for various parts of southeast Virginia and northeast North Carolina. Earlier in the week, it looked like it was going to be mainly snow, just a little bit of rain down along the southern Outer Banks. Now, because this is farther north, we're getting more warm air in. It's very likely that we're going to see a wide variety of precip types. Snow totals, this is far and away the least confidence that we have in any element of the forecast. It's low to moderate because the models are varying. We've seen huge swings in snowfall projections, and depending on where you are, if you're in the north, more snow. If you're near the coast or down to the south, you may be disappointed, especially if you wind up getting ice. As I mentioned, timing on the storm remains fairly consistent, so we are highly confident it's going to be a Saturday into Sunday and early Monday thing. All right, let's take a look at those latest kind of snow odds from our various ensembles. Eugene, I know this is something we talk about, and you enjoyed this, so if you have questions, we'll stop and kind of break it down. What you're looking at here are the chances for 1 inch of snow or greater, 3 inches of snow or greater, 6 inches or 12 inches of snow or greater, and you see 3 different ensemble models. Now, the ensembles, it's a model we take, and you adjust the kind of inputs or some of the variables, and then you just keep running the model over and over and over again. Maybe what if the winds are here? What if the temperature's here? Or the dew point's here? And what if the upper level winds are here? You keep running that model over and over. It gives you what looks like a spaghetti plot. With the hurricanes, when we run the ensembles, you see all these different possible hurricane tracks. And then you take a look at where's the greatest concentration. That's the likely forecast. In this case, we've taken a look, and here's what the European ensemble said. There's a 60% chance we have 1 inch or more. If you watch this, I think it was late Monday or I guess early Tuesday, we started doing this particular thing. It was like 100%.
Yeah, I was going to mention the numbers are very different from they were in terms of the confidence level, because I think it wasn't. One of the lines was all 100 at one point.
That was Euro AI. And it wasn't 100% that we were going to see all the way out that much, but very high amounts we would see 1 inch, 3 inches, or 6 inches, and then it dropped down to like 60% or something for 12 inches, okay? Today, you can see all those red arrows indicating that the Euro AI is like, okay, we're going to back it up.
Yeah.
And what I want to stress, and I'll tell you, Olivia, you can pop me back up on camera so I can make this impassioned plea to our viewers. When you see these numbers, this isn't what Craig Muller thinks is going to happen or what Tim Pandagis or Taylor or Hunter Evan are saying. I feel like it's 60% with the Euro. What we're doing here is we are passing along the specific output for Norfolk from these and letting you see what we're seeing in terms of, okay, it's trending a little warmer with less snow. Or in the case of the GFS, when you take a look at those green arrows, GFS has actually gone back up a little bit. So while the Euro's saying, no, not as great, Euro AI down in all of those categories, the Euro model, not the Euro AI, but the Euro model is holding the same numbers that we saw last night. It was lower, but they've been kind of holding on to this idea that we get more rain in. The GFS is saying, wait a second. I actually think there might be a little bit more snow, at least to these thresholds for parts of the area. So lots of questions still remain, but I wanted to share that with you. Now, here's what the models are actually spitting out this morning, and this is the one that may catch your eye. If you recall, yesterday we had like 9 inches or so. Basically, for Norfolk, the number's been cut in half. Virginia Beach, 4 to 5 inches, Norfolk, 4 to 5 inches at the airport, maybe a little bit more for downtown based on this kind of spread of forecast potential. You look at the Euro, they're down to about 1 inch in Virginia Beach, about 2 inches in Norfolk. Obviously a lot less, and why is that? Because it's warmer. We get more rain in, knocking that down. Same thing, that GFS still calling for a lot of snow Saturday night into Sunday morning, but as that warmer air comes in, it's going to knock down the totals. Do you have questions about that, Eugene, before we come off that?
It's been fascinating to me. I talked to my family because they're in Louisiana, and I was talking to some other friends, me being from Georgia, and all of them are all kind of having the same kind of phenomenon question for them because they're places that are not used to getting and seeing this type of potential accumulation there. And so it's just been interesting to me to see this system as big as it is, affecting so many states, particularly in the South.
Yeah.
And all of them bracing for this. I mean, it makes more sense Midwest and the Northeast, but the fact that this is impacting Southern Belt has been something that's been very fascinating.
Something folks think about. I want to show you. Let me see if I can pull this up. I'm doing this kind of on the fly here, and I'm looking at also what we did on the weather desk. I'm going to pull this up on the fly, and we're going to take a look at the GFS because I have a buddy that was reaching out to me from just outside of Memphis saying, hey, is this hype or is this real? That's my favorite. Are you guys hype? Not you guys,
hype or real?
But, it's like our local folks hyping this up. There is no point in hyping this up, okay? This is, hey, here's what our very best guidance is saying. You make your decisions. Look it down across the Deep South from Texas to Louisiana. This is Mississippi, Alabama, northern portions of Georgia, South Carolina. This is Saturday morning, 8 o'clock. You can see that mixed precip and freezing rain for parts of the area. And you can see as I bring this to the forward in time a little bit through the afternoon, you could see, well, it just jumped ahead, but you could see, my point is I'll try to bring it back a little bit. That's Sunday afternoon. I mean, parts of Georgia seeing some freezing rain down there.
Yeah.
They're not used to dealing with, who really is used to dealing with ice on the roads. I mean, I guess there's some parts of the country, but you know what I'm saying. That is an area that will have to make some significant adjustments. So that's the GFS, the Euro, very, very similar. And the other thing is, look at how far north that heavy snow extends through Pennsylvania and back up towards New York. Taking a look at the Euro, same deal. You see how that snow spreads to the east, and then you get that mix down across the deep south. I told my buddy down around Memphis, I said, hey, don't get hung up on the snow. Keep an eye to whether you're getting freezing rain or sleet or those other things. And again, the Euro, even though it's warmer for us right here in Hampton Roads, you see how heavy the snow is across northern parts of the U.S., the Northeast. All right, before we come off of this, I just wanted to show you the ice potential with the Euro, and you can see what it's doing. This is through Sunday morning. Initially, probably more snow than ice, but as we go overnight and some of that warmer air starts to work in, you see those areas out to the west, Ahoskie, Emporia, 1/4 inch of sleet or freezing rain potentially. Then as we go through the afternoon, this is where you really have some significant potential for sleet or ice accumulation. Those areas farther west, I think about Emporia, Wakefield, traveling 58 from Franklin out through I-95 at Emporia. There could be some really messy conditions, especially secondary roads that don't get the same treatment that the main kind of arteries do. And this is through Sunday afternoon. You can see the heavy stuff and even more overnight potentially, depending on how things play out. So nothing to sneeze at here. Even if you don't get the snow that some folks were hoping for, there could still be some significant amounts of freezing rain or sleet across parts of the area. All right, through Saturday afternoon and evening, that snow overtakes here. That's the GFS. Look at the snow, heavy at times, and then the transition, and then eventually the rain creeps into the picture there, especially near the coast. That's early Sunday. I think it's significant to note here, Eugene, how it transitions back over to snow early Monday. So refreezing and potential snow early Monday, something else we're watching for. The Euro shows that start again late Saturday night snow. You're looking outside, you're going, oh, look, it's beautiful, it's snowing. And then we start to see some mix and that transition to rain near the coast, and then more rain. And look at that cold air wedge shaded in pink there across Virginia's Piedmont, back out towards the mountains. Could see some more issues with ice out that way. Not that everybody's going to be caked in ice, but the potential's there for sleet and some ice accumulation. That shows us more ending as rain early Monday with the Euro. So that's a look. Now here's a quick look at the 7-day forecast. Mostly sunny today, 46 the high. Yesterday's high was 37. Tomorrow, 60. Remember that tomorrow when you get outside, it was 60.
That's first of all, that's incredible.
You know what's coming.
Like, to know what's coming in and knowing that tomorrow we're going to have a high of 60 is mind-boggling.
So Friday, we get the Arctic front pushing into the region, and behind that Arctic front, highs in the low 30s. Through the weekend, Sunday into Monday, Tuesday, and really most of next week as well. I think we get one day where we jump up a little bit next week. But aside from that, we are forecasting below average temperatures really for like the next 10 to 14 days.
Mother Nature just wanted to give us a little taste of something because she knows what's coming.
Thursday's like, here you go.
Here you
it's
go.
Like, want a lick? Psych.
I don't want a single complaint because I gave you what you wanted.
It's the old Eddie Murphy ice cream bit. Want a lick? Nope. Psych. Yeah. Want to warm up? Nope. Anyway, that's what we're looking at, guys. Man. And again, a potentially serious situation this weekend. That's why our weather team's working so hard to keep folks updated. No hype, no crazy spin or anything, just sharing data with you at this point. As we get a little closer, we will start really staking the flags in the ground, saying, okay, we're going to see 1 to 2 inches here, or we're going to see 4 inches there, or 6 to 8. We'll start putting out those bands ranging with what everything really starts to point to, and that picture gets clearer as we get, a couple days out. So we're getting close to that window, but we're not quite there yet.
Craig, we appreciate you. And again, all the work that you and the rest of the team are putting into this, because as you mentioned, people are asking you now when you're out on the street.
Oh.
I know I was at a grocery store. I didn't tell you this before, and someone was asking me about it. I mean, I talked to my friends in other states. People are really curious about how this is all going to wind up. So they're paying attention right now.
Literally dozens of people have stopped me just going to the store, the gym, out wherever they see us. It's like, all right, so what's really going to happen? I'm like, oh, really? Oh, come closer, I'll whisper it. But no, this is the way it's looking right now, guys. Again, we'll keep you updated and keep checking back with 13 News Now. As more information comes in, the picture will get clearer, but expect some more. I'm just giving you this advice. Expect some more fluctuations. Could be up or down with those totals over the next couple of days until things really lock in.
All right, Craig, we appreciate you. And again, as always, and especially right now, it's a good time to mention that if you need to get up-to-date information on the go, we do have our app, 13 News Now. You can download that to your phone. Obviously, you can download, if you're watching us live on YouTube, you can get this content on our streaming app, 13 News Now Plus, for Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. And you can also catch Craig in the mornings, 9 until 9:30, but I do believe the next 2 days it's going to be an extended 30 minutes. So it's going to be from 9 until 10 on 13 News Now Plus with the weather desk. Well, he'll tape even more, I don't want to say deeper dive because he's going in deep now, but you can get the latest up-to-date information there as well.
What's interesting tomorrow, so our station, 13 News Now Plus, is part of a large ownership group of stations across the country, and I know we're going to be talking with at least another Met. I think they've got a couple lined up that will be talking about what they're anticipating throughout the Mid-Atlantic, one from the D.C. area tomorrow morning as well. So that second half hour of the Weather Desk is going to include some other live interviews from other parts of the country, as this is going to be a big sweeping storm for much of the eastern U.S. and the southern U.S. as well.
All right. Well, please make sure that you are staying up to date so that you're prepared for whatever ends up coming on Saturday, Sunday, this weekend. Craig, thank you so much, man. We appreciate you. Okay, let's go ahead and change gears because, like I said, there's a lot of things happening right now. If we could actually take a live look here, Olivia, in News 1 Channel 4, because we have a live look of President Trump, who is currently in Switzerland. He just wrapped up a speech before European leaders at the World Economic Forum. He is now walking amongst them. You can see this live look. There he is. This is in Switzerland, in Davos. The president spoke for about an hour, maybe an hour and 10 minutes today about the U.S. economy and also hitting on Greenland. The breaking news that came out of that, the president says that he will not use force to take control over Greenland. He is instead appealing to European leaders in NATO to work with him on what he is doubling down as something that the United States needs. Okay, again, this took place just moments ago at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. His remarks about taking over Greenland, which of course is currently part of Denmark, have been the source of global tension, right? As NATO and European leaders have pushed back on the idea. We're going to get more into that later on in the stream. I wanted to show you that live in the moment. But we are going to start with some of what the president discussed today. In fact, it's what he started his speech off, and that is his assessment of the United States economy. So we're going to listen to the opening few minutes of what the president had to say, and then on the back end of that, we have a special guest here to talk about the economy, to talk about these things as we are 1 year into the Trump administration. But first, let's go ahead and cue up the opening statements today from the president in front of world leaders at the World Economic Forum.
Well, thank you very much, Larry. It's great to be back in beautiful Davos, Switzerland, and to address so many respected business leaders, so many friends, few enemies, and all of the distinguished guests. It's a who's who, I will say that. I've come to this year's World Economic Forum with truly phenomenal news from America. Yesterday marked the 1-year anniversary of my inauguration, and today, after 12 months back in the White House, our economy is booming, growth is exploding, productivity is surging, investment is soaring, incomes are rising, Inflation has been defeated. Our previously open and dangerous border is closed and virtually impenetrable. And the United States is in the midst of the fastest and most dramatic economic turnaround in our country's history. Under the Biden administration, America was plagued by the nightmare of stagflation, meaning low growth and high inflation, a recipe for misery, failure, and decline. But now, after just 1 year of my policies, we are witnessing the exact opposite: virtually no inflation and extraordinarily high economic growth. Growth like I believe you'll see very shortly our country has never seen before, perhaps no country has ever seen before. Over the past 3 months, core inflation has been just 1.6%. Meanwhile, fourth quarter growth is projected to be 5.4%, far greater than anybody other than myself and a few others had predicted. Since the election, the stock market has set 52 all-time high records. So that's in 1 year, 52 records, adding $9 trillion in value to retirement accounts, 401ks, and people's savings. People are doing very well. They're very happy with me. Since my inauguration, we've lifted more than 1.2 million people off of food stamps, and after 4 years in which Biden secured less than $1 trillion of new investment in our country. Think of that, $1 trillion, substantially less than that. In 4 years, we've secured commitments for a record-breaking $18 trillion, and we think when the final numbers come out, they'll be closer to $20 trillion of investment. That's never been done by any country at any time, not even close. Just over 1 year ago, under the radical left Democrats, we were a dead country. Now we are the hottest country anywhere in the world. In fact, the United States economy is on pace to grow at double the rate that was projected by the IMF just last April. And with my growth and tariff policies, it should be much higher. I really believe we can be much higher than that. And this is all great news, and it's great for all nations. The USA is the economic engine on the planet, and when America booms, the entire world booms. It's been the history. When it goes bad, it goes bad. You all follow us down, and you follow us up, and we're at a point that I don't believe we've ever been. I never thought we could do it this quickly. My biggest surprise is I thought it would take more than a year, maybe like a year and 1 month. But it's happened very quickly. This afternoon, I want to discuss how we've achieved this economic miracle, how we intend to raise living standards for our citizens to levels never seen before, and perhaps how you too and the places where you come from can do much better by following what we're doing, because certain places in Europe are not even recognizable, frankly, anymore. They're not recognizable. And we can argue about it, but there's no argument. Friends come back from different places. I don't want to insult anybody and say I don't recognize it. And that's not in a positive way. That's in a very negative way. And I love Europe.
All right, we're going to have more on that because, remember, I told you he also said some things that were breaking news regarding Greenland. We'll have that later on in the stream. But let's talk about the economy. You just heard the president's assessment of the economy in his terms here, as he has now reached 1 year in his second term as the president of the United States. And joining us to talk about some of the things that we are seeing here in America, let's welcome Peter Shaw, Professor Emeritus of Business Administration, Tidewater Community College. We appreciate you for being here. Peter, thank you so much. Just to be able to give context, it's interesting. We had already planned to have you in here today, and then the president decided, he was going to be speaking at this forum and speaking in large part about the economy and the world economy. So the timing of it just all lines up. We just listened to the president there, his opening statements, Peter, and, he called the U.S. the hottest country in the world. What does the data show right now in terms of the state of the economy, especially as polling has showed here in America that affordability has been such a huge topic of conversation for the average American?
Yeah, Eugene, you're right. I mean, the economy, we're seeing a disconnect between the growth in the economy and job growth, and we're seeing what consumers are feeling about the economy at this time. Yeah, University of Michigan has their survey they do of consumers. If the score is up around 100 or close to it, that means they're very optimistic about how they feel on this, whatever the subject matter may be. However, in 2025, the score was at 57.6, which is about half of what optimism would be. And it is the lowest score in the history of University of Michigan's survey, which dates back to the early 60s. It is the lowest score. So you start asking the question, okay, if we're getting a low score, what's going on is causing it? Well, when you look at things like natural gas prices have gone up about 11% over the year. You've seen electricity go up around 7%. You also have seen, for example, I was looking over here. Good news is airline prices have gone down a little bit, about a little 3.4%. Motor vehicle and maintenance has gone up almost 6%. And hospital services, medical care has 6% and climbing. And so what is happening is when you look at the data from the survey, consumers in December of 2024, their score was 74. And now it's 50, in December of 2025, it was 52.9. Boom, it has dropped a lot. When you look at personal finances currently, back in 2024, it was a score of 85, getting better, and it dropped down to a score of 68 come this December. When you look at economic outlook 12 months out, back in December 2024, the survey showed 88. It's now dropped to 59. When you look at the economic outlook 5 years out, and in December of 2024, it was 94, and now it's 64. That's a 30-point drop. So why is this happening? Well, consumers are battling with rising prices still. They're dealing with tough real estate market, for sure. They're seeing slower job growth. Here in Virginia, for example, in 2024, the state was adding about 6,100 jobs a month. In 2025, that dropped down to less than 1,000. That's an 80% drop. Lower wage gains. And the thing I always impress upon people, they said, well, I got a 5% raise. Well, that's great. But let me give you an example how that plays out. When you get a raise, that's a gross number before taxes. And I always tell people, if you got a 5% raise, after they take out all the payroll taxes and all that good stuff, you get about 3.5% take home. So that's the number you have to pay attention to, your take home pay, not that gross number. And I said, here's an example. If you get someone making $100,000 a year, they get a 5% raise. That's $5,000 raise. But after taxes come out, it drops to about $3,000. So remember that 3,000 number. You get someone at 200,000 getting 5% raise, they will get $10,000 raise, and they're walking away in this particular case with about, about $6,000, about double, 6,000. So you can have the same raise increase rate, but the different income brackets, take-home pay-wise, is a big difference. And we're seeing that a lot of the folks, the upper income and the upper middle income, they're carrying the load. They're doing great. The lower middle income, lower income, they're taking it bad. As you can see, as we mentioned some expenses we mentioned earlier.
You know, it's interesting. The president obviously spoke glowingly of his economy there from this, from the podium, and we're hearing a clash there with the data that you're sharing, and obviously the way that he's describing things. He was talking about even with inflation. He said inflation is down, lower than other places in the world, saying that he had set stock market records, more than 50 records in the stock market. in adding more money to people's 401ks. Those are the things that he is saying are taking place in the moment. And we know, just let's start with the stock market, indicators, because I've always been curious what we can glean from a stock market, because it can change at any given point. Even within the last several hours or so, we've seen it kind of change and shift based upon the president's words about Greenland and with our European partners. And so when people are hearing that and they're hearing, an assessments based on those kind of elements, what are your responses to them just in general when you're trying to monitor that as a sign of whether or not the economy is going well or bad?
Well, the economy is really counting on the efficiency of technology and AI technology. So you're seeing that piece there. But what is really happening is, for example, let's take the auto industry. In 1978, they had 1.5 million United Auto Workers. Today, it's about 150,000. That's a 90% drop. Well, what's happened? Well, what's happened is the technology has moved in and automated more and more of the jobs in the manufacturing sector. And that's not the only area they're permeating. So what's happening now is if you're a worker today, you cannot be stagnant in your skill sets. You must be highly skilled, and you must be what I call a smart worker, continuously improving those skills. If you don't and you fall behind, you're going to be a victim of possibly of a layoff. So what we're seeing is that, the economy's efficiency is helping boost it, but there's a big disconnect on job growth. We're not seeing the job growth go parallel with it at the same rate.
And I'm glad you mentioned the auto industry, because we know, I think it was last week that the president was in Detroit and he was touting some of the efforts that the administration wants to make to make sure that the auto industry is booming, saying that he really is pushing for companies to bring everything back into the United States in terms of building and manufacturing. In your assessment, based upon even what you're just saying there, obviously this is an industry that needs a bit more of a jump start in our country. That has forever been, one of the leading things that we've had within this country for generations prior. What's your assessment on what will happen is it possible, first of all, for those companies to just reinvest overnight here into more American manufacturing, or what would need to take place moving forward to kind of bring it back?
Yeah, when the auto industry CEOs met with the president last spring when he was talking about his first wave of tariffs, they told him, Mr. President, if we move a plant from Canada to the United States, it's going to cost us over $1 billion, and it's going to take probably up to 5 years to have it up and running. So it's not a flip of a switch or a snap that this thing's going to happen. We just want to make that clear. Now, one of the reasons that U.S. auto industry is in Canada is that they don't have to pay any health care costs, because the country already has a national tax for that. So that cost was a big piece of their production cost, believe it or not. It costs more for health care coverage per auto worker than it does for the steel that goes into the vehicle. And so this is a big issue they're trying to emphasize to the administration. Look, it takes time. It takes a lot of money to relocate those big plants. So I think I'm hoping the auto industry keeps reminding and refreshing in their minds, we might be able to do this over time, but it's not going to be fast, not at all. Also, you have to remember, CNBC back, I think it was in October, showed that the average automobile purchase during 2025 was $50,000. And then when I thought it couldn't get any worse, they announced the other day that at the end of the year in December, in the auto industry, the truck sales, they had a surge in it because they were running end-of-year specials and so forth. But still, the average price was $66,000. Now, I don't know about you, but most middle-income families I know, $50,000 and $60,000 for a vehicle is, in many cases, prohibitive. And I'm seeing more and more people retain their vehicles and so forth. So I guess the auto industry has decided that they're going to focus their attention to the upper middle income and the upper income to carry the load. And that may be the case because I have a tough time believing the middle income and lower middle income can afford vehicles that expensive.
Yeah, I've had so many different conversations, including even today this morning with someone who is potentially getting into the car buying market. But the concern is how much are they going to have to shell out in order to get it, even the more economic friendly cars at this point. So certainly interesting. You mentioned tariffs,
right?
And the conversations that the auto industry execs had with the president. The president also speaking this morning and has repeatedly said, tariffs have been such a big part of his economic and international strategy. I think we've seen him use tariffs in a way that we have not seen before and at a rate that we have not seen before. Now, last week, the Trump administration came out and said, I want to make sure I get the number right. This was from Customs and Borders Patrol, that it collected $200 billion in revenue from tariffs. But there have been multiple studies, including one just released this week, that said it's the American consumer that is footing a lot of that bill. Who pays for tariffs? Where does the money come from? Is it revenue, or is it taxpayers putting more into it?
Yeah, Goldman Sachs put out a publication last fall. I think it was last fall. No, it was late fall, around November, December, that said that in June of 2025, when the first wave of tariffs were coming into play, the consumers were paying about 22% of the tariff. Corporations were figuring out how to absorb the rest. Well, we move along to October of 2025, that 22% number jumped to 65%. So it's clear to me that more and more of the tariffs are going to passed on. I will tell you, in my non-scientific polling and talking to small and medium-sized business owners, they're making it very clear to me they have no option but to pass it on. They don't have enough margin. It's just not there. They don't have the grand scale economies of scales of the big boys. So they have to pass it on, and it's becoming a quite noticeable problem. We were, my wife, we had our roof put on in 2009 for about $9,000. To replace it today, they're quoting us prices of $34,000, $35,000. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And then they come back and say, well, maybe we get you down to 26, but still, it's a major impact, and the roofing hasn't gone up that much, But you're seeing all of these elements. The president gave his speech this morning and talked. He selected his numbers, which I would expect him to, but he stayed away from consumer sentiment. He did not talk about that. He did not talk about. He says polling numbers were through the roof, not the numbers I've seen on the screen or in the news. It is clear that the average American, and again with this consumer survey from Michigan, the consumers gave the lowest score in the history since the early 1960s ever.
It's very interesting, and in talking about tariffs again, a lot of big news that we're still waiting on at this point. Is the president going to place 10% tariffs on those European countries who don't support his desire to take control of Greenland, as he has said that he could do? What is the Supreme Court going to decide, as they have now heard arguments on whether or not the president has the power to do what he has done since he's come into office again in issuing these tariffs under the emergency orders with all of these different countries. So tariffs have really been such a if there were people who didn't know what a tariff was prior to all of this, you probably should be familiar and know what it is at this point for sure, because it has played such a huge role in our economy and international affairs here in the last year. But I want to ask you now about interest rates, because
before
go ahead.
Before we do that, you need to also pay attention that the president is using tariffs in a way we have never used them before. Tariffs traditionally were issued going back to the 20s, Smoot-Hawley Act and so forth, that helped lead to our Great Depression because they went crazy with them. But the tariff is a governmental tool. It's an artificial tool in the marketplace because it's imposed by the government to really address trade imbalances between two countries. He is using it now as part of his foreign policy. That is a different strategy now. It doesn't have anything to do with trade, like the threat of raising the tariffs on Europeans that oppose him on Greenland. That has zero to do with trade. That has to do with foreign policy. We have never in the history of the United States done that before. And I'm sure our world trading partners are going, oh my God, what's next?
Yeah, and they have been pretty outspoken here, in the last several days. And so I'm looking forward to even hearing from our world partners, trading partners, after this speech that he gave today. We have yet to hear from them, as they're likely at this point either being interviewed or still attending. So it'll be interesting to hear that.
And again, you got to remember the CEOs of these companies, every time he changes those tariffs, he's got to assemble his top team going, all right, how does this impact the company? What do we do? It's a very, this knee-jerk reaction is very difficult on the business world.
Certainly different than what we have seen in years past.
Sure.
Interest rates. He spoke a lot about that. The lowering of interest rates, and we know too there's been a lot of pressure, from the administration on the Federal Reserve, and even now it looks as though there's more of an investigation that has now been waged against the Federal Reserve and its leader Jerome Powell over the building construction things, but it fits into the pattern Powell says of the pressure from the administration for them to lower the interest rates. You and I have talked about this in the past in various different stories, dating back even prior to the Trump administration, when we were in the former Biden administration. We were talking about, okay, what is the Fed going to do? How do they navigate whether or not we're the high inflation rates, or are we in a judging by what you've seen from the Fed and in your expertise and seeing where we are now, they've been really kind of hesitant to continuously lower and lower at the rate that the president would want. Do you see the Fed strategy in terms of how they've gone about it this last year and the effectiveness of it?
Well, you got to remember, what is the mandate that Congress has given the Federal Reserve? It's given two mandates. One, price stability. In other words, keeping inflation at a reasonable number. And then unemployment. Okay. Now, what we've noticed up until recently, the Fed was focused on the inflation rate. It was very reluctantly or very slowly lowering it because it wants to make sure it's coming down. Well, suddenly, at the same time, we've noticed in this past year in particular, the unemployment rate rising. And now the Fed seems to have pivoted from the inflation rate focus to the unemployment rate focus. And my sense is, in reading everything, all the stuff I've been reading, is that maybe 2 cuts at a quarter each this year, maybe. But a lot of it is going to be dealing with, okay, now if the pivot now is unemployment, if we have these European rates kick in at higher rates, I guarantee you prices are going up. Now you got to pivot back to the inflation. And that's going to have an effect on their rate cuts.
And one thing I always think about, obviously because we're here in the United States, we're thinking about what things are like for us as Americans here in the United States. But so much of an economy is a global phenomenon. How are we, in terms of, are we seeing any similarities between what we're experiencing in America than what maybe people are experiencing in Europe and other parts of the world? Have there been any similarities that we've seen that we're just, because we've been so focused here, we haven't been as much over there?
Well, first of all, I don't believe anywhere else in the world have you seen a leader of a country use tariffs as a part of their foreign diplomacy. I don't, I'm not aware of any. So this is all new. The rest of the world's going, wait a minute, how do we deal with this president? If we disagree with him, is he going to threaten us with tariffs? which have zero to do with trade, and that's what the tool is devised for. That has caused, without question, a lot of problems in our trading partners. You know, when the Smoot-Hawley Act was done in 1929, we raised, and actually the act passed, I think, 1930, but we raised tariffs up to 60%, and that triggered a trade war, which also led to us losing overseas, a drop in global trade, I think like 3/4 drop over a 5-year period, and going into the mid-30s. If we're not careful and we trigger one of those again, you could see another recession in global trade.
We got Peter Shaw here. We appreciate him so much. Anything else that you feel like we should pay attention to in terms of the economy? So many people have affordability on their mind because we have a few moments here. Anything else you think, hey, pay attention to this, see the signs, or something that you're seeing as a trend? Yeah,
first of all, as I say all the time, develop a budget.
Yeah.
Separate, the needs from the wants, okay? Focus in on the needs, make sure you get the money there. And then look at the wants. And if you have extra cash left over, I would recommend that you cut your wants by at least 10% if you have extra cash. Take that cash and start paying down debt. And pay off your higher interest rate debt first. And then if you have cash left over in that, use that to put into investments and get a return. You can put into savings if you want, and I say okay. But on balance, we're seeing investments in the marketplace earning better returns than you're going to get in a savings account. Also, keep a reserve cash flow if you can, in case of, you lose your job. Do you have 3 months cash built up in reserves? So what I get, my central theme message here is focus, focus, focus on a budget and a management of your cash flow, first and foremost, because we don't know in this year coming up what is going to happen with prices. And so that is my message. Stay focused on the budget, and again, the needs versus the wants, and then what do you do with the extra cash? Knock down that debt as fast as you can, as fast as you can.
I think that's solid advice there.
Yeah.
Peter Shaw, Professor Emeritus of Business Administration, Tidewater Community College. It's always great to talk to you. And then when I get to see you in person as well is even better, Peter. So thank you so much. We'll get him situated here in a second. We're so glad to have him here. But I do want to get back to Greenland. Again, in that speech at the World Economic Forum today in Switzerland, the president doubled down in his desire to take Greenland control of it. But again, he says that he would not use force to do so. Now, days ago, you heard me say it a few minutes ago, that the president floated the idea of 10% tariffs on European countries that do not go along with that idea. It's been said that the administration has wanted to tap into Greenland's resources there. But the president, in his speech today, says it's not about that. It's not about resources. It's about position and strategy. Take a listen to what he said in regards to Greenland.
So they're going to go back to the drawing boards, I guess. Greenland is a vast, almost entirely uninhabited and undeveloped territory that's sitting undefended in a key strategic location between the United States, Russia, and China. That's exactly where it is, right smack in the middle. Wasn't important nearly when we gave it back. When we gave it back, it wasn't the same as it is now. It's not important for any other reason, everyone talks about the minerals. There's so many places. There's no rare earth, no such thing as rare earth. There's rare processing, but there's so much rare earth. And to get to this rare earth, you got to go through hundreds of feet of ice. That's not the reason we need it. We need it for strategic national security and international security. This enormous unsecured island is actually part of North America, on the northern frontier of the Western Hemisphere. That's our territory. It is therefore a core national security interest of the United States of America. And in fact, it's been our policy for hundreds of years to prevent outside threats from entering our hemisphere, and we've done it very successfully. We've never been stronger than we are now. That's why American presidents have sought to purchase Greenland for nearly 2 centuries. You know, for 2 centuries they've been trying to do it. They should have kept it after World War II, but they had a different president. That's all right. People think differently. Much more necessary now than it was at that time, however. In 2019, Denmark said that they would spend over $200 million to strengthen Greenland's defenses. But as you know, they spent less than 1% of that amount. 1%. There's no sign of Denmark there. And I say that with great respect for Denmark, whose people I love, whose leaders are very good. It's the United States alone that can protect this giant mass of land, this giant piece of ice, develop it and improve it and make it so that it's good for Europe and safe for Europe and good for us. And that's the reason I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States, just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history, as many of the European nations have. They've acquired. There's nothing wrong with it. Many of them. Some went in reverse, actually, if you look. Some had great, vast wealth, great, vast lands all over the world. They went in reverse. They're stuck back where they started. That happens too. But some grow. But this would not be a threat to NATO. This would greatly enhance the security of the entire alliance, the NATO alliance. The United States is treated very unfairly by NATO. I want to tell you that. And when you think about it, nobody can dispute it. We give so much and we get so little in return. And I've been a critic of NATO for many years. And yet I've done more to help NATO than any other president by far, than any other person. You wouldn't have NATO if I didn't get involved in my first term. The war with Ukraine is an example. We are thousands of miles away, separated by a giant ocean. It's a war that should have never started, and it wouldn't have started if the 2020 U.S. presidential election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. Everybody now knows that. They found out. People will soon be prosecuted for what they did. It's probably breaking news, but it should be. It was a rigged election. You can't have rigged elections. You need strong borders, strong elections, and ideally a good press. I always say it. Strong borders, strong elections, free, fair elections, and a fair media. The media is terrible. It's very crooked. It's very biased, terrible. But someday it'll straighten out because it's losing all credibility. Think of it. When I went in a landslide, a giant landslide, won all 7 swing states, won the popular vote, won everything, and they only get negative press. That means that it has no credibility. And if they're going to get credibility, they're going to have to be fair. So you need a fair press. But you also need those other elements. And I inherited a terrible, terrible situation. If you look, the border was open. The inflation was raging. Everything was bad with the United States when I came into office. But I also inherited a mess with Ukraine and Russia, something that would have never happened. And I know Putin very well. He and I would discuss Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, but he wasn't going to do anything. I said, Vladimir, you're not doing it. He would never have done it. It was terrible what happened. I could see it happening, too. After I left, I could see it happening. Biden had given Ukraine and NATO $350 billion, a staggering sum, $350 billion.
Okay, you were listening there to the president. This just in his speech less than an hour ago. He wrapped that up there in front of world leaders at the World Economic Forum. You were mentioning, again, Greenland and his quest to take control of Greenland, saying that they will not use troops or force to do so, but he is wanting to negotiate and work with the European allies in order to achieve this particular goal. The other thing, again, that I thought was very interesting is that it had been talked about and reported that the administration was interested in those rare earth minerals there in Greenland, and the president saying that's not what this is about. This is really about strategic positioning of national and international strategy, saying that the positioning of Greenland will help them in terms of Russia and China. And so the president kind of skewering those or putting to rest in his mind the assertions of what has been reported and said it could be about, and just straight out coming out and said he believes this is more about a strategy situation. The other thing you heard him mention about Russia as well, and we do expect for the president, or at least for U.S. officials and Russian officials, to meet this week as well. So a lot of things taking place here on the international stage. We did record that meeting, so if we have another time, either in this one or maybe a later stream, we'll try to share it. I want to do this because we're at 10:55, talking about the economy, obviously, with the World Economic Forum. And in that room were leaders from across the country, but people across the world were watching what the president said today, and that includes leaders right here in the U.S. And right now, as we speak, we have Democratic leaders in the House who are speaking. I do believe they're talking about, in at least a part, about the economy, likely mentioning the president's speech earlier this morning. So let's hand it over to them, see what they're saying here for the next few minutes.
Ranking member, I can appreciate some of the work that went into the bill, some of the additional pieces that they were able to place in bill language. I also understand that with a continuing resolution, ICE would likely have more flexibility. But what we heard overwhelmingly was our members, and in the last 24 hours, we've heard our members speak loudly that ICE isn't doing enough. These reforms aren't enough. Their lawlessness has to stop. And they are only doing this because they can. They're only doing this because the President of the United States wants to use them to terrorize communities, to terrorize U.S. citizens, as the Vice Chair heard directly last week in Minneapolis, St. Paul, to scare people. There are kids throughout this nation who are not going to school because they're afraid. They're afraid that they're going to get picked up. They're afraid that their family member who is taking them to school will be picked up. That's just wrong. There aren't enough guardrails within this bill. I can still appreciate the work that went into the bill while mentioning that common sense reforms that Democrats put up as amendments and alternatives were roundly rejected. They should not be allowed to detain U.S. citizens, and they are. They should not be able to fire at moving vehicles unless their life is in danger, and they are. That's wrong. The caucus has concerns about it, and I don't think we're going to have true accountability until Democrats are in charge. Our Republican colleagues don't seem willing or able right now to offer the level of oversight and critique of that agency that also, by the way, funds things that we support. TSA, FEMA, those are important. That's important work that the federal government does. It's unfortunate that the behavior of ICE is jeopardizing the Homeland Security bill.
I know you were just speaking on behalf of the caucus, but have you figured out your position on the bill yet?
I shared with the caucus this morning, and the leadership team has shared with the caucus that we'll be voting no unless there are any substantive changes or amendments in the Rules Committee.
To answer your question, ICE is out of control. And how do we know that? We now have the extraordinary actions of local law enforcement holding press conferences and issuing statements and doing interviews criticizing ICE. So let me read you what Hennepin County Sheriff DeWanna Witt said. Quote, "I am seeing and hearing about people in Hennepin County stopped, questioned, and harassed solely because of the color of their skin," Witt said. "We cannot let people in our communities think that our local law enforcement leadership is okay with actions that are not only wrong, but illegal." Brooklyn Park Police Chief Mark Bruley, in a press conference, said, "In an attempt to record the incident, the phone was knocked out of her hands, preventing her from recording it. The officers had their guns drawn, and after the officer became so concerned, they were forced to identify themselves as a Brooklyn Park police officer." So now you have ICE.
Okay, so you heard there from Democrats in Congress who are speaking, Ted Lieu there at the end, and they are obviously speaking about what's happening in Minneapolis right now. So many storylines, as we've been telling you on the stream in the last several days, about on the ground there with that ICE operation, that massive ICE operation, and the now tensions between the federal government and state and city officials. The federal government said that it is investigating Governor Tim Walz, and then also the Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, and for things that they believe have gone against the efforts of ICE there in the community. So a lot that's coming out. We'll get to that in just hopefully at some point during this stream, because right now we do want to switch gears, and we have a guest who's coming on to talk to us about healthcare premiums, which we know has been a huge topic across the country, but particularly here in Hampton Roads as well. We have parents, seniors, families, small businesses. A lot of people have been struggling to keep up with those health insurance costs. Even as the monthly premiums have gone up, people are still facing high copays, surprise bills, denied claims. And so there's a lot of conversation right now for people on how they can afford these costs. And with more on this and why these healthcare costs are so high, we welcome former health insurance executive and president of the Center for Health and Democracy, Mr. Wendell Potter, who joins us right now. Wendell, can you hear me?
I sure can. Can you hear me? And thanks for having me on.
I can hear you, and thank you for coming on to the show. We certainly appreciate it for a very important topic here that's on a lot of people's minds. Okay, I got to ask you this first question first, right? Why are families paying more each year when we're talking about premiums and deductibles and copays for health insurance in general? What has driven the high cost for the average day American when it comes to their health care?
Two words, corporate greed. And it's because of the way health insurance companies have changed over the years. I used to be a healthcare executive. I was an executive of Humana and Cigna for 20 years. The companies have become massive corporations, and most of them are traded on the New York Stock Exchange. First and foremost, they have to satisfy the profit expectations of those shareholders and a handful of Wall Street financial analysts. And to do that, they have to deny more claims. They have to make us pay more money out of our own pockets for care, even as the cost of a health insurance policy gets more and more and more expensive, and restrict our access to doctors and hospitals. These are barriers they've set up just so they can enrich their shareholders. And all of us are paying dearly for this out of our own pockets. The family policy these days costs about $27,000 on average. That's the price of a car. And even with that, the value of our insurance policies goes down every single year. So it's high time that Congress does something about this. This is a historic week because members of Congress are hauling in the CEOs of 5 big insurance companies for congressional hearings, and they're going to be in the hot seat.
And I got to ask you this. You said it's time for Congress to do something. I'll get some other questions. I'm just going off of that first. What can Congress do, in your estimation, in order to address the issues that you're citing?
2 or 3 things. There have been some members, actually on both sides of the aisle, who've called for the breakup of these companies. They have become giants. United Healthcare is owned by a corporation that is the 3rd largest company in America by revenue. United Health Group operates a big health plan, but it's also gotten increasingly into healthcare delivery. It's the biggest employer of doctors in this country. My team and I did a research project that we found that company alone has 2,700 subsidiaries. It's just enormous. The company that owns the Aetna health plans, CVS Health, owns all the 9,000 retail stores and a big pharmacy outfit that sucks so much money as a middleman out of the pharmacy supply chain. So that's one thing I would like to see more attention focused on. How can these companies continue to be this way? Why aren't they being held to the same standards that banks are held to, for example, that cannot engage in some of these self-dealing practices that these companies are doing with? There are other reforms that there is bipartisan interest and support for, but there's a lot of work that members of Congress must address.
And for everyday people who are paying, these costs and they are feeling the pinch every time that they're dealing with anything with healthcare, what would you say to them? What can, in your estimation, that the everyday American can do as they're trying to figure this out on their own?
2 or 3 things. One is to be a squeaky wheel. If you are ever denied coverage for something that your doctor says you need, appeal that denial. Don't take that as the final answer, because insurers know that a lot of people don't appeal. They don't fight back. But fight back if you're being denied something. Number two, if you get your coverage through an employer, complain. Complain about the cost of health coverage and about your lack of choice. Very few people have much choice to choose a health insurance company. Complain about all that you have to pay out of pocket before your coverage kicks in. And let your members of Congress know about your experience and how unhappy you are. They need to hear from their constituents. Many of them already are. Some of them are doctors and pharmacists, and I've talked to many of them on both sides of the aisle. They're beginning to understand more and more how these corporations have taken over our healthcare system and why that's not a good thing. But they need to hear from their constituents.
Well, like I said, we appreciate you coming on because there are a lot of people who certainly have questions when it comes to their healthcare and concerns. And when we talk about those prices, it's something that we've repeatedly talked about, Wendell, here, particularly when you had the ACA enhanced subsidies and a lot of people affected with that here in Hampton Roads. But we appreciate you breaking that down.
Sure.
Just one last question before I let you go. Where can people go to get more information from you and then the group that you are with?
I lead an organization called the Center for Health and Democracy. You can find us there. And a newsletter that we publish is called Healthcare Uncovered. It's published on the Substack platform. It's free, no charge at all. So look us up in both of those places.
Okay, that is Wendell Potter, the president of the Center for Health and Democracy. Wendell, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll have to have you back at some point.
I'd like that. Thank you very much.
All right. Appreciate you and take care. Interesting conversation and to hear from him, and we're glad we were able to get him in so he can share his insights. I'm sure a lot of people resonate with some of the things that he was saying there. But right now we want to do this. The closing arguments have begun in the case of the former Uvalde police officer, Adrian Gonzalez, who has been charged with not doing enough in his response to that deadly 2002 mass shooting at Robb Elementary School. Right now, we are seeing attorneys that are, again, supposed to be giving their closing arguments in that case. Let's go ahead and bring that up right now. Here we go. So we're going to spend the next few minutes listening. Again, this is the case there in Texas. Adrian Gonzalez faces 29 counts, one count for each victim in that shooting, and he has pleaded not guilty.
I've been trained. Shots fired at a school. Not the information in the school. Shots fired. Robb Elementary. Man with a gun. I've been trained. I may have to go in solo. It was the police administration's fault because they didn't assign a person to each school. I suppose that statement is really, if they had assigned somebody, as long as it wasn't Adrian Gonzalez, the outcome would have been different. The defendant's case. Then we moved to the other police officers, Page, Hill, Sauceda, Coronado. And I'll ask you to look through your course charge and find where it says evaluate the conduct of Page, Hill, Sauceda, or Coronado. You're here to decide one case. But we're glad to talk to you about these officers. Page, the funeral home tape alone shows you that he shows up 2.5 to 3 minutes after Adrian Gonzalez is there. That, along with the Robb videotape, shows you that he entered the building within 30 seconds. He shows up, there's shots going on, he assesses the situation in 30 seconds. He's acting. He's acting. Not failing time. Hill, you recall that it's Hill's responsibility because he was called to Old Carrizo Road. He goes to Old Carrizo Road. He arrives there after the gunman is already inside the school. after the 16 shots from outside had already been fired on the other side of the school. The testimony was there was radio chat about setting up a perimeter. So he sets up a perimeter. Because here's what officers do. They get dispatched and they act. And when they get there, they assess a new set of information and they act. And after he sets up the perimeter, then he joins other people. And yes, the testimony was 25 minutes before he goes in. But Ruby Gonzalez told you that once those hallways get full, it can become dangerous to overclutter that hallway, so you find other things to do. Well, if there's a perimeter, doesn't that count for Adrian too? If Adrian got the call to set up a perimeter and he goes there, so be it. But then you gather additional information. And that is 16 shots being fired outside, 24 shots being fired in the hallway, 60 shots being fired in classrooms, and a teacher saying, he's over there, you gotta get in. And you respond after you get the additional information. Salcedo shows up 30 seconds after the gunman has started shooting. The gunman shooting into the glass, into the classrooms. That's before Salcedo gets there. And halfway up, you know it's when Salcedo gets there because the bag is dropped. And then shots are fired. 6 shots are fired from behind a long row of cars. You're talking about him having an instant in which the gunman we know is hurrying the last part of that trip. We know the gunman is not firing into the building at that point. He's firing somewhere else. They think they're taking shots. If it's behind the vehicles, there's school classrooms with glass windows. If it's to the south and west, there's a man in dark blue or black. Permission to fire. Being careful. And then getting in his car and acting and following his sergeant to the end of the corner where Coronado says, I believe that's Salcedo. Also jogging to find the gunman. He's acting. And Coronado arrived to the sound of, he said he was receiving gunfire. The man at the funeral home is telling me, I think he says 2 or 3 the building. He's the officer that came that is used to these being bailouts, and maybe it's a road rage, and that's what he's used to doing, whereas a school officer is used to protecting the school grounds. And so he's thinking this is a road rage, and the guy's shooting at us because he doesn't want us to get him. So he goes around to cut him off. But in going around to cut him off, he's acting. He's acting to stop the shooter. You may not like his decision. You may not be proud of his decision, but he's acting. This is a failure to act case. And you know that he's acting because he jogs. He's looking for the gunman. And when he hears shots fired, he acts within 2 seconds. Get in the building, shots fired, and he goes in. He acts. And then the defense brought you evidence of the challenges. that Adrian is facing. We start with tunnel vision. That's the whole issue about whether or not Adrian Gonzalez saw the gunman in the parking lot. We have no trouble with the concept that he had tunnel vision and focused on the lady in peach. This charge does not start with Adrian Gonzalez arriving at Robb Elementary. The charge starts specifically with after hearing shots fired, after Melody Flores, witness number 1, which you can conclude now is Melody Flores, told him the general location of the shooter, and then having time to act. That's when the case starts. So he has tunnel vision. Okay. Auditory exclusion. Perhaps he didn't hear the shots. Now, why would you tell the Rangers when Melody Flores told me where he was, I heard the shots? How does that happen? This was really complicated. Complicated set of facts I have to decide on. Complication, the training is you hear shots, you go to the gunfire. He heard shots and Melody Flores was pointing where to go to the gunfire. There's nothing complicated about that. He's wearing black. He's over in the teacher's parking lot. Go to the gunfire. Perimeter. Why doesn't Adrian get to set up a perimeter if Hill gets to? Why didn't Adrian tell the Rangers? I heard I was supposed to set up a perimeter. That's why I set up a perimeter. That isn't what he said. He said, I waited for cover before I was going in. And finally, this is an issue of stress. And this is my closing remark. I'm sure you're tired of listening to me. That was a dark day. For 29 families, it was extremely dark, and they still wait justice. And I can't live that darkness. But I can say this, there were some bright spots. In that stress, teachers put their kids first. In that stress, kids made ways to try to defend each other. In that stress, kids comforted teachers. In that stress, kids came first. Adrian Gonzalez had a duty to put the kids first. And he called for cover.
Proceed, Your Honor.
Yes, sir, please.
The monster who hurt those kids is dead. That monster is dead. And we told you from the beginning. And it is one of the worst things that ever happened. And I told you, the first time I stood up here and talked to you, I told you that you were not going to be the same person when you come out of this. And nor should you be. Nor should any of us. Witnessing horror, the tragedy, the loss, It's immeasurable. It's immeasurable. It's unthinkable. That loss is unthinkable. Their loss, it's unthinkable for any of us. You know, I told you guys before, I have a 4-year-old, a 1-year-old. And, you know, we told you we're from San Antonio. And obviously, you know, I want to go back and see him on the weekends after the first week. I went back. The first thing I did was my 4-year-old came downstairs and I hugged him. Right? And hugged him. And started crying. And his hair, you know, trying to, so he doesn't see it. He said, "Are you sad, Daddy?" I said, "No, I'm happy that I'm holding you." Because I know what a privilege, doing this case, I know what a privilege it is to hold that child. I do. Right? I know, I can just imagine what it's like to not be able to do that. And I can imagine the pain, and I can imagine the anger. I can imagine wanting to put somebody in that chair because I can't put the monster that did that to my child in that chair. I can imagine. And I can imagine putting pressure. And I can imagine them responding to the pressure. And I can imagine them putting him in that chair. Him and only him. In that chair. To try to pay for the pain. To try to somehow this can cover the immeasurable and the immense loss. And so after I saw him on Friday, we have to come back here that Sunday after the first week. And Gary, he comes and picks me up. That's kind of what we've been doing. And my son comes out and he says, "Are you going to go help that man?" And that's what we told him is the reason I'm not there. I said, "Yeah, in a minute, I'm going to go help that man." Adrian Gonzalez. Because he needs my help. He needs our help. Because they, the government, the power of the state, has decided that he has to pay for the failures of that day, for the mistakes that were made that day, and for all the pain that they feel. And it's not right. Because the person that they plucked out and put in that chair, that person showed, we showed throughout this trial, that person was acting. He was acting. He was trying. And what I hear from the prosecutor, what I hear from the state, and what you've heard this entire time, what you've heard is that they will massage all the facts, they'll twist them all into a pretzel. That every one of these officers is fine, he's not. They'll twist it. Well, look who acted. They acted. Well, Adrian acted. Well, he didn't act the right way. They acted. Well, they didn't act the right way. Well, yeah, but he didn't act the right way, and he didn't know exactly what was going on, and he remained. Well, yeah, but Adrian remained in the hallway. Adrian remained in the hallway after he got shot at. Well, yeah, he remained in danger at that point, but before that point, he remained, and he didn't know what was going on. Every fact that they've tried to bring, they've twisted it around. I'm going to show you. You're going to watch. I'm going to show you what they've done to twist this thing from the beginning to the end. But ultimately, what we're talking about is we're talking about duty, we're talking about burden, and all of those things. And I don't want one thing that I'm saying right now to make you believe that he doesn't believe that he has a duty to stop something that he knows is going on. Of course he does. He knows that. He was trying to do it. He started trying to do his duty. Look at some of these other people. No. They're not trying to do their duty. They're trying to stay back. And one of the things that the prosecutor said, he said, what you do here will tell law enforcement, give them how they respond. I'll tell you what, I agree with that, but not in the way that he's saying it. Because the way he wants you to believe it is what your verdict says is that next time these officers will make the right choice, the right decision. They will respond appropriately. They will be perfect. But the problem is that the issues here are not that Adrian failed to respond. They're not that he was intending not to engage. So you're not going to fix any of that. Because I'll tell you, and I kind of hope it never happens again. I think we all know that it probably will. But those officers, what your verdict says is not going to make them perfect the next time. It's not going to make them not make mistakes. It's not going to make them not interpret things differently, strangely, weirdly based on their own experiences. That's not what it's going to do. But I'll tell you what it would do. If you convict them, they're all going to be Randy Hill on that perimeter. There's nobody going in. What did he do? He went in. And you convict him, what does it tell all the police officers? It's going to tell them, I'm not getting in that crowd. I'm not getting in that chair. If I see somebody running towards the school, I'm not going after them, because if I'm mistaken and it takes me to the other side of the building from where the shooter is, and then I can't understand or know where the shooter is, I can go to prison. I can get prosecuted. So what you tell police officers is don't go in, don't react, don't respond, stay on the perimeter, because Randy Hill isn't sitting in that chair. He's not. Adrian Gonzalez is here. Randy Hill is not. None of those officers are in that chair. That's what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them, don't do it. And you can't tell them that. It's like, I agree with them. You can't tell them that. We cannot have law enforcement feel that way. Feel like if they're not perfect, if they don't make a perfect decision, and that's where they go. And their family goes right there. There's nothing that's going to bring these kids back. There's nothing ever is going to solve that pain. Nothing. Not that. Because one of the things that Bill said to you is he said, those kids deserve to be remembered, and they do. But you do not honor their memory by doing an injustice in their name. You don't. That does not honor those children. By doing an injustice, by doing what they want you to do, by letting him massage the facts, by letting the pretzel go all the way around and miss everybody else, but keeps going right back to him, because that's what they need. We talk about the charge. If I can get it up. The duty. So remember this about what the court has read to you. And remember, I'm not saying he doesn't have a duty. Of course he does. But just like every officer, just like the officers in San Antonio, they all had the duty. But that's, and it may have sounded flippant when we compared it. We said, look, you're in San Antonio. There's a school shooting, right? You didn't stop it. Well, no, because it's not happening in the presence. And the reason we're asking that question is because the law is specific about it. A person, they have a duty to prevent an offense against a person about to be committed in his presence. So the first thing you have to figure out is that in his presence? You know, and the judge told you, you know, use common meanings, but he is here, and he never, they're not even disputing, he never saw the shooter, ever. He is never in the presence of the shooter. Now what Bill may say is, well, he didn't go to the presence. But that's not what this law says. Law doesn't say you have to go and find yourself and make yourself be in the presence, and I'm not trying to make any excuse about that. But the law is the law is the law. This isn't about you have to go seek it out and make it happen in your presence. The law is saying if it's happening right there, there's a duty. Of course there is. He was doing his duty. He was running to the danger. He was driving right in there. And if that was the gunman, and God, I wish it was, he would have ran right over him. That's what he was doing. He's going 50 miles an hour at that person. Now, what I'm glad is he didn't run the person over because he realized it's Melody Flores. He realized it's a coach is what he thought, teacher's aide. But he realized who it was after it's already too late, but he's here. And from this point, that shooter is never in his presence, ever. There's never a time. The only time that he gets close is when he goes, one of the first 5 people to go up that hallway. That is a hallway of death. Anyone going into that hallway knows, anyone knows, any police officer knows, that those rifle rounds start coming that way as they're coming up the hallway, it's death. They don't have any equipment. They don't have anything to block it. It's death. He went in that hallway of death. See, and I thought about it because, you know, there's no way I can tell you about how they feel. But I thought about it as a parent. As a parent with kids there, if I knew that while my kid was in that classroom, somebody was going up that hallway, risking death to try to get to him, I'd appreciate it. I would. I mean, they're not perfect. But the person who did it, the monster, is dead. But he went up. A lot of people there didn't. A lot of people didn't enter that building until it was the room was surrounded on all sides by officers with rifles. Not one person on the side that he went in had one. Not one person had an AR. Not one person had a rifle. And they went in. Donald Page went in. Coronado went in. Chief Arredondo went in. Those people all went in and risked certain death. And the only time that he could have even been close to being in the presence of the shooter is when the shooter shot at him and Page through the wall. And you heard that testimony that there's gunshots going through the wall that they have to back up because not only can they not get to the door at all, they cannot get to the door. Joe Vasquez told you, that door, you're going to die at the door. You will die at the door. And I know that what the prosecution's saying is you should. Your job is to die at the door. But there was a lot of people out there. And if that's the training, die at the door, then everybody out there didn't follow it. Everybody out there waited until there was shield. Everybody out there, Joe Vasquez included. Everybody. And you remember what Joe said. He said, thought his daughter could be in there. And he still waits 50 minutes for shields, for a plan, for BORTAC. So that's what I'm saying. They're twisting it around and they're saying, well, his job, every shot was noticed that Adrian had to go in and be the person to die at the door. To be the person that tried to breach, solo entry with nothing. But nobody else did that. So is that the training? Right? Like that's one of the things that you have the right to go, because that's count 2, disregarding his training. Is that the training? Because if that is the training, and all these officers have been trained, and not one of them does it, but only one of them sits there, right? Like you have to twist it. Every time, for every fact, has to be twisted around. That no other officer, I'm assuming, they made a point. Everybody's trained an active shooter. But that's why we pointed out that, well, now it's become a barricaded subject. And that training's different than active shooter. Now, some people are treating it like a hostage situation. And that's different than active shooter. And so the point is with this training was never meant to be twisted and used like this. You think that anybody that's put on police training is going, yeah, and if you don't follow this, you're going to prison? That's not what they're doing. They're trying to give the best possible tactics and strategies to get to the best possible outcome. That's the point. But go back to the duty. If you find right there, honestly, he was never in the shooter's presence. Never was in his presence. Because that law, do not let them argue that law means that he has to go put himself in the presence. That law says it has to be in his presence. That's what that says. And if that's there, and you say that wasn't in his presence, then it doesn't apply. Under 605, he has a duty to prevent the threat, to do injury, if within his power. So they have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that it's within his power. Because what they're not talking about is, no, this is saying you have the duty to go and follow the gunfire. That's not what this says. It doesn't say you have a duty to follow the gunfire. What it says is if it's within his power. So all of the officers before the breach, all the officers that even, and I don't have anything bad to say about Joe Vasquez. That man went in there. He went in there and he was willing to put his life on the line. But going in there like that in that room, it's not a whole lot different than going up that hallway, the first people to go up there, without any protection, without any rifle-rated anything, without any fire, without any rifles, without anything. But what that's telling you is that the reason that they waited is because it was within none of their power to get in that room. It was within none of their power to do that. It was not within his power to get in there and stop it, and it was not within any of those other guys until they got the right equipment. And then they went in, and it was within their power. But if they haven't proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Adrian could have done something to prevent, if beyond a reasonable doubt, then that doesn't apply. And then, of course, the education code just says he protects the safety and welfare of people in his jurisdiction. Well, of course. But that's not a duty. I don't even understand why it's there. It's not a duty to say, well, yes, and if you violate it, you go to prison. If you violate it, you're a convicted felon. If you violate it, you're going to be on trial. That's just telling police officers, and especially those who work at schools, that your duty is to do that. Of course it is. That's your job. Of course it is. But what we're talking about is we're talking about a man who is trying to do that. He is not trying to do that. He's not he's not going, I'm not protecting anybody. Oh, uh-oh, shooter. And then drive off the other way. He doesn't drive around the building. He doesn't drive away from the gunfire. He's still trying to figure this out, because we're talking about 1 minute and 48 seconds under their indictment. He keeps saying 3 minutes, but it's 1 minute and 48 seconds. I showed you this in board hour. When we talk about beyond a reasonable doubt, possibly, probably, guilt likely, strong belief. If you have a strong belief that he had a duty, it's not guilty. Right there. That's why I'm talking about duty first, because as the prosecutor explained, if there's not a duty, then there's not. And not one of this is to be interpreted as me saying that he doesn't have a duty. We all have a duty to each other. He's a police officer, and he's going to do what he can. But when we're talking about criminal charges, if you even have to get to, well, it's likely that he does have that duty. It's likely that it was within his power. It's likely that it was within his presence. I have a strong belief it was in his presence. I have a strong belief that it was within his power. That's not guilty. It's a verdict of not guilty right there. That's the first consideration. But going to the indictment, after hearing gunshots and after being advised of the general location of the shooter, and Nigo's going to talk to you a lot more about this, like, it's convenient the way they're twisting it. It's convenient the way they're saying, well, of course, he was advised. She told him, 1, 2, 3, and told him exactly where it was, and she pointed over, she's over here, pointed over there, and he knew. That's how they're presenting it to you. But that's not how we know that that's not how it happened. We know, we have to know, because she is frantic. She is very unclear about a lot of things. And so if you have a reasonable doubt that he was advised of the general location of the shooter, that's not guilty. If you have a reasonable doubt that he had time to respond to the shooter, clicker slow on the uptake. Right, having time to respond to the shooter. If you have a reasonable doubt as to that, it's not guilty. Right, because what we established, you know, even now when he's reading Adrian's statement, shots fired, or she told me where it was, shots fired, I radioed it out. He's compressing time in his interview, and we're going to talk about that. He's compressing that time. The way he's telling it, she tells him, da-da-da, and then he communicates it on the radio. We know that that's not what happened. We know that from the time of shots fired to the time he communicates it on the radio is a longer period of time, which is accounted for by the fact that he is trying to get the information out of her. Once he does, he communicates it. Once he communicates it, we told you, it's a second after this monster's already gotten in. It's not an unlocked door, but it's already gotten in that door. When he communicates this out, the guy's already there. So having time to respond. Once he finally figures out what it is, does he have time to respond? And if he does respond, we were showing you, if he does respond over here, he's responding to something that's not even there anymore. He's doing basically what Coronado does, which is go completely away from where they saw him go in and go all the way around the building. So if there's a reasonable doubt as to having time to respond.
Okay, you were sitting there listening in to closing arguments. That's from the defense for Adrian Gonzalez, the former officer there in the Uvalde case. And again, he is being accused of not doing enough, not responding fast enough, and doing enough in his response. The day of that deadly shooting that claimed the lives of all of those children and 2 teachers. I do want to bring our attention to something that just broke within the last few minutes or so. This is back on the conversation of the president, the United States, and its desire to take over Greenland. Just coming in, a key group of European Parliament members have blocked a vote to ratify a U.S. and European trade deal. This coming off the heels of President Trump threatening to take over Greenland, and then also saying that he would add tariffs if the European nations did not go along with his plan. I want to show you right now, the chair of Parliament's Trade Committee posted this on X. He said, now official, EU-US deal on ice indefinitely. We have just decided to suspend work by the trade union on the legal implementation of the Turnberry deal. Citing this is the part I want you to see as well. Our sovereignty and territorial integrity are at stake. Business as usual impossible. He puts the hashtag Greenland tariffs, making it very clear what they are talking about in terms of what is threatening the relations at this moment. On their website, the European Parliament posted this, talking about that Turnberry deal. It said that it would have suspended tariffs on all U.S. industrial goods and established a tariff rate quota system for a large number of U.S. agri-food products entering into the European Union. However, by threatening the territorial integrity and sovereignty of an EU member state and by using tariffs as a coercive instrument, the U.S. is undermining the stability and predictability of the EU-U.S. trade relations. That from a press release released within the last 2 hours or so that they have now come forward. CNN reporting it's unclear if the entire trade agreement, which called for 15% tariffs on European Union goods shipping to the U.S., has been called off, or only parts of it have been called off. If you remember, the EU and the U.S. Came to a deal preliminarily back in the summer, back in July, I believe, putting a lot of this into effect. So this could likely have major implications moving forward, and we'll see how the president responds. Just today, earlier this morning, we told you and we showed you bits and pieces of it. The president speaking before leaders in Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, saying that he would not attempt to take Greenland by force, but did double down on the desire to take control of the country. He said for strategic purposes, positioning both international and national security is what he cited. So that was the breaking news that just came out within the last hours or so, and I wanted to share with you on that. Right now, though, let's head to Washington, D.C., where a House Oversight Committee is expected to move forward with plans, holding the Clintons in contempt of Congress. This all in connection to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. So right now that is live. Let's go ahead and take what they are saying in the moment. This is, again, a hearing over whether or not to hold Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton into contempt of Congress.
Point out that we are living in an age of hypocrisy, because my other colleague just pointed out that Mr. Perry sits here and somehow sits in judgment of others. Frankly, that is what people are kind of getting annoyed by, is the hypocrisy, because Mr. Perry still has an outstanding subpoena that was never complied with. In addition to that, he talked about we need to care for the victims. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, and I will yield my time. But I don't believe that Mr. Perry ever signed off on the discharge petition in the first place. So I don't know if he is just doing what he believes is politically expedient, but I will tell you this. I refuse to be a puppet, because Democrats tend to be of goodwill. We always want to do the right thing. We are always trying to follow the rules and follow the law. Unfortunately, we are living with an administration that does not care. We just want some type of parity. So, for instance, we all want to hear from President Clinton. If for some reason you said, we will give you, say, Pam Bondi, and then we've got President Clinton with it, or say maybe President Trump and President Clinton, two presidents, because we know that both presidents actually had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But what looks political and looks like one can get away with everything, especially since that's what the Supreme Court has stated, that's why it looks like it's just gamesmanship. You only care about following the rules so long as you can invoke those rules on what is typically perceived as your political enemies. This is why we are falling apart in this country. We are supposed to be about checks and balances. It should not matter whether or not you're associated with the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, independent, or whomever, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're middle class, whether you're a black immigrant, or whatever. But it seems like we only have a political agenda in this committee, and that's why everything goes off the rails. You only love law enforcement when they're going after black, brown, immigrants, that kind of folk, right? But on January 6th, you didn't care about law enforcement because they still don't have their plaques up. We continue to do the right thing and say, yes, apply the rules equally across the board, and then y'all play in our faces and you only apply it to one side. I am asking for one commitment, and then I will yield to the ranking member. Mr. Chair, will you commit to me, as the chair of probably the most important committee in this Congress, especially in this moment where people are concerned about the level of corruption that exists within this committee, will you promise me that you are good for doing whatever is right and following the evidence, no matter who is on the other side of that evidence?
Yes,
Yes
and that is why I subpoenaed the estate. And we had no idea what was, nobody knew. Nobody knew
I
what was in
understand,
the
but-
estate documents. And I, without hesitation, subpoenaed the estate. We've subpoenaed the Department of Justice.
And that's where we got the birthday letter. We subpoenaed
Because
the
of
estate. Hold on,
the
Mr.
subpoena,
Chair.
right.
Okay, we got the birthday letter, but we can't just get the evidence and then not follow up on the evidence that we actually get. I will relinquish the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you. I just want to just really clarify
I'm in
one.
Riker.
Thank you very much, Representative Crockett. Just to back to Mr. Walkinshaw's point, I think it's important to clarify that in communication, Mr. Chair, with your team and the back and forth with the emails, the Clinton team made it clear that they wanted to answer questions about Epstein, but that was not something that your team agreed to, only about Epstein. And so that's, I just want to make sure to clarify, and I appreciate you clarifying, Mr. Comer, that you said that you would limit the questions to only Epstein. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I
And
think
what the
that's-
Clinton said that is not true. What their lawyer said is a complete lie.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you clarified for them, because it's been their impression that it's been. I'm just telling you, it's been their impression.
He's paid them too much money then over the last 5 months.
And sir, I'm just reading emails, and I'm just reading the back and forth between them and your team. It's been their impression that those questions were going to be beyond just Epstein, and so I'm glad that's been clarified. So thank you, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Chair recognizes Mr. McGuire from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. 5 months is plenty of time. The Clintons are doing everything they can to avoid questioning. And the American people want to hear from the Clintons. You know, Bill Clinton brought Epstein to the White House 17 times. He had him on, and Bill Clinton was on the Epstein airplane 26 times. So the American people want to hear from them. I don't understand why our friends on the left can't understand that. They support these crazy policies like open borders. 20 million people coming to our country. They've been robbing, raping, and killing the American people. You know, Lake and Rowley would still be alive. And instead of protecting law-abiding citizens, they defend the criminals, and they want to have a defund the police movement. It makes no sense. These criminals they put back on the street, recommit the same crime, and they're like, why did they commit the same crime? All Americans have the same goal, the same American dream. We want to live, work, and raise our family in peace. We just might disagree on how to get there, but the Democrats seem to always be wrong. The American people don't want boys undressing in girls' locker rooms, but for some reason, the Democrats support that. 5 months is plenty of time. The American people want to hear from the Clintons, and they said they had no relationship, but they definitely did. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time back to Ms. Luna.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to point out, first of all, specifically to the letter, the hand sketch that was allegedly the president's. I believe there's a $10 billion lawsuit that was filed that, according to the president, the organization that published that is actually trying to currently settle, so just to clarify. But aside from that, I wanted to actually ask Mr. Min a question, if he's here still, if he would be willing to vote for a contempt in the Clintons if they refuse to come in and testify on a fine of about $1,000 a day until they comply with the subpoena. But I don't know if he's here. Is he still here? No. Okay, well, I think that that's just something to consider. You know, we have the ability to do those fines, and I think that that needs to be considered, especially if, you know, optically there is reason for pause for Democrats not wanting to vote for that based on the fact that President Clinton was a former president. I understand the optics of that, and I also understand re-elections. However, nonetheless, the Clintons are defying a subpoena, so sometimes financially people can be motivated, especially if there's a fine, and that's something that we actually all reserve the right to vote on. And I think that that's actually a very good option, especially being that most Americans would go to jail for defying subpoenas. And so I do not think that there needs to be any special accommodations made, especially given the nature of this, but I do think that that can be a tool to motivate. So I'd like to suggest that to you, Chairman Comer, also to you, Ranking Member Garcia, that would be a good method that we specifically reserve if we choose to use alternative means of contempt.
Representative, would you yield to me for a question?
Yes.
So it seems like you're open to changing this, what we're voting on today, so that way we can get to a place where we actually hear from them. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
What I want, yes, I would like to have the Clintons coming into Congress to give a transcribed deposition.
Yeah.
I think that Chairman Comer has made that clear, but I also think having just Garcia and Comer drive all the way up to New York without that, I think that optically that sends a very bad message as the separation of powers and authorities Congress has. And then I also too think that, you know, it's kind of a slap in the face to people that typically would not have those accommodations made for them.
Yeah.
With that also, you know, being a part of this, I think that, you know, Bill Clinton specifically said he wants the files to be released. And I think that we also need to consider the fact that there is a judge. I know Mr. Garcia disagrees with me on this, but based on the email that I have seen on Judge Paul Engelmeyer, you know, if you have someone that is ordering the DOJ to do a second scan of the files, if it's politically motivated, that's impeding an investigation. And I'm tired of judges, if they get involved in investigations in Congress, trying to obstruct. And so I just putting this out there, I'm going to be trying to impeach that judge unless he can basically give a waiver, let the DOJ release the files immediately.
Yeah, and just real quick, I just want to say on the general thing, I agree. I mean, I think it would be best if the ranking member and chair can huddle and figure out how we can change it so we can actually hear from them. Because my concern too, and the other thing is, there's no faster way to make sure that we never actually hear from them in person than moving forward a criminal contempt that says put them in jail. I mean, we're just not going to hear from them for our investigation. And so, I mean, I agree if they can come to something to figure out how can we move forward in a way where we're actually, there's a pathway to hear from them. I'm for that. So
To be clear, I do not agree with what the Clintons are doing, okay? And I think that they need to come in here to explain. But I do think that when you go after someone's pocketbook, I think that they quickly change their tune, and I think that they might be compelled to come in. I also don't want to set the precedence, though, that, you know, just because you're a president means you're outside of this, you know, justice. And that's basically what it would be doing. And so, Chairman, I will let you direct the ship on this, but that is my suggestion.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Ms. Ansari.
Thank you. I'm going to start by yielding to the ranking member.
Thank you. And I want to just respond to Ms. Luna and Mr. Maxwell as well. Just to be clear, I think two things can be true. It can be true that we want to hear from the Clintons and that it's important that we hear from them and that we want to enforce our subpoena. I think it can also be true that they have also begun clearly making efforts to answer questions by declaration, to negotiate coming in, to give testimony. They've made offers to obviously be in, their initial offer was to do that testimony outside of Washington, D.C., with the leadership of the committee and staff. They have been open to transcription. And so I just want to re-emphasize that I think there is room here to continue to negotiate and get the testimony that we need. In addition, I am incredibly thankful that we're finally moving forward on ensuring that Ghislaine Maxwell come before this committee, that we're going to get Pam Bondi finally in front of this Congress. We need to release the files, get that testimony, and of course, ask the questions that this committee has of President Clinton. I think that is all fair, and I hope that's the direction that we end up moving in. Thank you. Ms. Ansari.
Thank you. Given much of what we've heard today, and especially in light of some of the hypocrisy that we've heard today, I just want to walk through the timeline of Donald Trump's cover-up of the Epstein files, because I think it's important for folks to remember how we got to this point. This was a series of deliberate decisions made at the highest levels in the White House and the Department of Justice to keep the truth hidden from the American public and the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and his allies' abuse. Let's start with what the president said during his campaign trail repeatedly. At multiple points in 2024 when running for office, Donald Trump said he would, quote, declassify the Epstein files, use it as a rallying cry to win over voters. In October 2024, J.D. Vance said, quote, seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. But the moment Trump and Vance had power in the White House to act, that commitment disappeared. That's when the cover-up began. On February 27th, 2025, Pam Bondi said that she was releasing the Epstein files with her statement, quote, this Department of Justice is following through on President Trump's commitment to transparency and lifting the veil on the disgusting actions of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators. Then it became clear, very clear, that Donald Trump did not, in fact, want information about Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes revealed to the public. Starting in July 2025, Donald Trump began to gaslight the public. He said, quote, "Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years." This is the point when Congress stepped up. On July 23rd, Congresswoman Summer Lee moved in this very committee to subpoena the full and unredacted Epstein files. And just to be clear, because of that subpoena, the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi have been required by law to provide the Epstein files to this committee since the summer of 2025. They have been in gross illegal violation of the subpoena this entire time. To my Republican colleagues on this committee, do you remember that subpoena, the lawful congressional oversight subpoena from July 23rd? Pam Bondi has been in violation of that for 6 months now. At the same time, members on both sides of the aisle filed a discharge petition that would have put a vote on the floor for the Epstein Files Transparency Act. For a moment, the petition was one signature away from forcing a vote in the full House. And what did Mike Johnson do? He shut down Congress. He refused to swear in our colleague, Adelita Grijalva, for a historic 7 weeks in order to keep her name off the list. He forced the American public to endure a government shutdown to protect Donald Trump and to cover up the Epstein files. And when it finally came to the floor and it became clear that the bill would pass overwhelmingly, only then did he endorse and then sign the bill so that he wouldn't lose. This required the DOJ to release the unredacted Epstein files publicly by December 19th. The DOJ has blown past that deadline, releasing only 1% of the files, which is patently absurd. And the files they did release were heavily redacted, which is completely illegal according to the law. On December 23rd, the DOJ said they miraculously discovered over 1 million files related to Epstein. All of these patterns are an attempt to slow down the release and fail to meet the lawful deadlines are consistent and coordinated. This is all part of an intentional cover-up, which leads to the unavoidable question, who is the president protecting when we know he only cares about one person? I guess I'll end with my question to the chairman. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has violated the subpoena issued by this committee. We should be holding her in contempt to remain fair and to remain transparent. And so I ask that you do that if you really, truly want to be fair and care about the justice for the victims here.
May I respond? We have been very clear. We expect those documents. She has complied. She's turned over documents. In the
1%
in the beginning, you all complained. And
Okay, we can keep him in boxes here just momentarily. Again, you are watching a House Oversight Committee meeting at this point in which they are debating, and it likely will go through, that they will hold President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton in contempt of Congress. This all complying with them failing to comply with committee subpoenas related to the investigation into the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. And so those are the arguments that you are hearing at the moment. The Clintons not believing that this is something that should be going on. They were told to arrive to be interviewed. I believe it was last week or the week before last. They did not show for those. And here we have House Republicans who are leading this push now to hold them in contempt of Congress. Okay, that is the end of our stream at this point for Live Impact News. We hit on a lot of things at this point. Again, if you're watching us live on YouTube, we appreciate